Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, counter-spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into a time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
A mutual show that we don't know too much about from the Mutual Broadcasting System that ran at 10:30 at night was entitled I-was-a-convict. This goes back 76 years to October 17th, 1946, a Thursday night show, and this is entitled Bad Check. And we'll tell you more about the show as we go along. We thank you for tuning in on this Monday. This is the 17th day of October, and this would be the 290th day of the year, 75 days left till we get to 2023. German astronomer Johannes Kepler observed an exceptionally bright star had suddenly appeared in the constellation on this date in 1604, Ophiuchus, which turned out to be the last supernova to have been observed in our own galaxy, the Milky Way. American troops defeated the British on this date in 1777 in the Battle of Saratoga. Thomas Edison filing a patent for the optical phonograph on this date in 1888. That would be the first movie. First published on this date in 1888, National Geographic magazine. Al Capone convicted of income tax evasion on this date in 1931. In 1933, Albert Einstein, fleeing Nazi Germany, came to the U.S. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, Donald Duck's three almost identical nephews, first appeared in the comic strip on this date in 1937. The 1964-1965 World's Fair closed on this date in 1965. After a 2-year run, more than 51 million people attended the fair. The musical Hair opened at the Ansbacher Theater on Broadway in 1967. OPEC started an oil embargo against a number of Western countries in 1973, considered to have helped Israel in its war against Syria. And, of course, that really was the first huge spiral of gas prices. In 1979, Mother Teresa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize.
We deal with people that are the sick and the hungry and the naked and the homeless. We take Jesus at his word, because Jesus had said, I was hungry, I was naked, I was homeless. And we try to just make a home for the homeless by giving a shelter to the people who are in the streets or unwanted.
She was canonized, recognized by the Church as a saint, on September 4th, 2016, and the anniversary of her death, September 5th, made her feast day. Department of Education Organization Act signed into law on this date in 1979, creating the Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Both replaced the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. Thomas P. Tip O'Neill bid farewell to Congress on this date in 1986.
What am I proud of? Most of all, I've seen America change. I've seen middle America, middle class develop. I've seen the American dream come true, and I've played a part of it. That's what I'm proud of.
O'Neill spent 34 years in Congress, 10 as Speaker of the House, 50 in politics. He passed away in January of 1994 at the age of 83. In 1989, the Loma Prieta earthquake, 7.1 on the Richter scale, hit the San Francisco Bay Area on this date in 1989.
Candy Maldonado with the hesitation, allowing Jose Canseco to score, and he fails to get Dave Parker at second base, so the Oakland A's take a 2-1
I'll tell you what, we're having an earthquake.
Al Michaels, Tim McCarver covering Game 3 of the World Series on this date in 1989. This would be the first earthquake televised live nationally. Mother Teresa beatified, as I said, by Pope John Paul II on this date in 2003, and Saddam Hussein in 2005 went on trial in Baghdad for crimes against humanity. Passing away on this date in history, the delightful Tennessee Ernie Ford, the entertainer Joey Bishop, singer Teresa Brewer and her music. For top singer Levi Stubbs, from composer of the themes for Green Acres and the Addams Family, Vic Mizzy, passing away on this date. Mr. C, Happy Days, Tom Bosley, passing away on this date. Wrestler Mike Graham and singer-actor-skier Noel Harrison, all passing away on this date in history. This is the birth date of a number of actresses, including Spring Byington, Irene Ryan, Marcia Hunt, who passed away just a few weeks ago at the age of 104, Rita Hayworth, Montgomery Clift, Tom Poston, very, very funny man, and Margot Kidder, and Saturday Night Live's Norm Macdonald. Also born on this date, Pope John Paul I, the co-creator of Superman, Jerry Siegel, playwright Arthur Miller, also, nutritionist Robert Atkins, Daredevil Evel Knievel, Jim Seals of Seals and Croft, who also passed away earlier this year, Gary Puckett of the Union Gap, Lady Willpower, 80 years old today, Lenny on Laverne and Shirley, Michael McKeon, 75 years old today, also Chuck McGill on Better Call Saul. Norm on Cheers, George Wendt, 74 today. The first African-American woman in space, Mae Jemison, is 65. Country singer Alan Jackson, 64. The man behind Beavis and Butthead and King of the Hill, Mike Judge, 60 years old today. Rapper Eminem is 50. Actress Felicity Jones from The Theory of Everything and Rogue One, 39. And from Red Riding Hood and Bitter Harvest, Max Irons is 37. Those just a few of the people celebrating the 17th day of October is their birthday. If this happens to be your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say... Happy birthday to you.
From 76 years ago, October 17th, 1946, I Was a Convict, here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite station.
You know, it's true. Difficult times have a way of focusing us. We have to think about what matters most when it comes to our spending, our health care. No doubt. This is why so many people are joining MediShare right now. MediShare is a trusted way to save up to 50% on your monthly healthcare costs. More than 400,000 people have already made the switch. It's pretty obvious why, too, especially now during this challenging season with healthcare costs and out-of-pocket expenses going up. MediShare can save you a lot of money. The typical family saves $500 a month. And MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry that's worked beautifully for 29 years. There are different options to choose from to fit your budget. I'll give you the number here in a second, and if you call, you can get a price within 2 minutes. Maybe now is the perfect time to make the switch and start saving. Here you go. Call 833-34-BIBLE. That's 833-34-BIBLE. 833-34-BIBLE.
Thank you for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Now, a show that we know next to nothing about. I had told you all I know about it. I Was a Convict, from 76 years ago, October 17th, 1956.
Believing that crime takes only a moment to commit, but requires a lifetime to prepare, the Mutual Broadcasting System, in cooperation with the Society for the Prevention of Crime, presents
I Was a Convict.
Bringing you the dramatization of a crime, an interview with the woman who actually committed this crime, followed by questions from the studio audience. And now we go back 8 years to one night in the back room of a small bar. A young woman sits at a table drinking.
Hello, Joe. Are you going to pass up an old drinking companion?
Hiya, Bea. I didn't see you.
Well, sit down.
Okay.
Have a drink.
Nice idea if you let me buy tonight.
That's out.
Look, I don't get it. I don't understand you at all.
Sometimes I don't understand myself.
You're a swell gal, and I like sitting here and talking to you. But you won't ever let me buy you a drink. What's the matter? Is my money poison or something?
I like it this way. That's all.
Yeah, but listen, V. I feel like a heel drinking off you all the time. Now, look, I got paid today, see? So tonight, let me buy the drinks.
No, Joe. Put your money in your pocket. It's either my way or you can sit somewhere else.
Oh, but listen, B. That doesn't seem
Waiter.
quite...
Yeah?
Bring him a double scotch. And bring me a pen and some ink.
I don't know about the pen and ink.
Oh, I got a fountain pen if you want to write something. Here you are.
Thanks, Joe. Make it 2 double scotches, waiter.
Okay.
You gonna write a love letter, B?
No. I wouldn't write a love letter or any other kind of letter to anybody.
Why not? What have you got against the world?
Oh, nothing. Everybody's all right to drink with, but that's all.
Wow, you sound as if you mean it.
I do.
You mean to tell me a swell girl like you doesn't have a boyfriend?
Boyfriend? I had a husband once. Yeah. And a kid, too.
Where are those drinks? Well, I guess it's tough, but... Oh, things will work out.
Oh, sure, yeah. Things will work out fine.
Okay, double scotches and a bill.
Take it out of this check and bring me the change.
I don't know about the check, lady. I'll see if the boss will okay it.
Now, look, you know me. I've been coming in here for a long time now, and I've cashed checks here before. Well, now, go ahead. Bring me the change.
Beef, forget about it. I'll pay. I told you I had money.
Quit worrying, Joe. There's plenty more where that came from.
Prisoner will stand to receive her sentence. You have been found guilty of passing a worthless check in the amount of $50. Inasmuch as the court knows something of the circumstances surrounding this crime, and taking into consideration that this is your first offense, I sentence you to an indeterminate term in state's prison for women. However, I am going to suspend sentence and place you in the custody of your father. Is the father of this defendant in court?
I am, Your Honor.
Will you accept the custody of your daughter, sir?
No. She's done wrong and she should be punished. I will not accept the responsibility.
Do you realize what you're saying, sir?
I do. She's no good. I won't have anything to do with her.
Well, in that case, you leave me no alternative. I hereby sentence you to an indeterminate term in state's prison for women, such term to be not more than 5 years. Take her away.
In the studio, we have Miss B, the woman who committed this crime. For her protection, as well as other people concerned, she will be known as Miss B and will not be visible to the studio audience. With Miss B is Edwin J. Lucas, Executive Director of the Society for the Prevention of Crime, who will try to find out what made this woman commit this crime and identify the drive behind this criminal behavior. Mr. Lucas.
Now, Miss B, was that the first crime for which you were convicted?
Yes, it was.
And after your release from prison, when you returned home, what was your father's attitude?
Said I looked very well, and I should have stayed 5 years.
That was a dreadful thing to say. Now, you've been convicted several times since that first conviction, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Suppose you tell us something about those other convictions, Miss B. Tell us about the second time you got into trouble.
The second time was on an invitation to dinner. A friend of ours, a gentleman, was my escort. Before the evening was over, there was a diamond ring missing. This woman, knowing of my record, naturally accused me. I was convicted.
And how long did you serve for that?
18 months.
Well, just before that offense, you forged some checks to the tune of about $1,000, didn't you?
Yes, I did, Mr. Lucas.
What names did you use to sign these checks?
My maiden name and my first husband's.
Oh, yes. Now, how long after your release did you get into trouble again?
I should say about 3 months.
Well, that was the third time, wasn't it? Tell us something about that.
After I left the prison, I found a job that I liked very much, and I intended to keep it. Well, I broke one of the rules of the firm by going out to luncheon with a member of the firm. The boss the next day spoke to me about it and wanted me to identify the gentleman, which I refused. The result was that he asked me very nicely to leave.
What happened then?
There was nothing else that I could see worthwhile staying around for, so I took to Maine. That meant money, and I drank a lot and forged checks on the way.
I see.
It was brought back and resentenced.
I see. How long did you serve that time?
From 5 to 10, I served 3.5 years.
I see. Now tell us about the last penitentiary sentence that you got.
That penitentiary was for violation of parole, my trip to Maine.
Oh, yes. And how long did you serve this last time?
1 year.
Yes. I gather you've spent most of the last 8 or 9 years in correctional institutions.
That's quite right.
Would you estimate for us the longest period you've been out of an institution in that time?
About 5 months.
Did you spend all of the proceeds of the worthless checks you cashed on drink and on clothes?
No, just drink and jukeboxes.
And jukeboxes. Well, now I'd like to pause here for a moment to point out to the radio audience that in every police station all over the country are hundreds of records of cases like this. But what's missing in these police records is an explanation of why women do these things. And that's precisely our purpose, to find out why, to locate the causes behind this criminal behavior, so that while children are developing, we may recognize the danger signals and do something about them. Now, Miss B, let's turn back the clock. I'd like to discuss your childhood. First, tell me, what kind of a woman was your mother?
Rather domineering. She ran the house. And my father.
Yes. Was she affectionate?
No. Not at all. Very undemonstrative. Not toward any one of us. I mean, there wasn't any favorites. It isn't as though she showed favoritism. Yes. She just was made that way, and that was all there was to that.
Well, how did you feel about her attitude toward you?
I accepted it. I thought that was part of one's family life. I never can ever remember being jealous of any other little girl having more affection than I. I gave mine to some stray animal, dog or cat or something.
Oh, really?
My only way of just loving something.
Did you bring them into the house?
No, I wasn't permitted to bring them in, to get them off the street.
Didn't you miss your mother's affection?
I knew I missed something. I knew a pat on the head would mean a great deal to me. Oh, just any sort of a caress. I think about it, but then it didn't bother me too much to throw it up.
Of course, we heard how your father behaved on the occasion of your first conviction. But wasn't your father loving and affectionate on occasions?
Not that I ever remember, no.
Did your parents punish you often for mischievous behavior as a child?
No, I seemed to be rather a well-behaved child. I didn't seem to need too many, but what ones I did need, I was told I was going to be punished. And I'd go out and get my own switch and tell the youngsters to wait just a few minutes. I'd be back. I was just going to get a spanking.
Yes?
And forgot about it and came out to play.
I see. Now tell me, did you ever steal when you were a child?
What? Cherries.
Cherries, yes.
From my mother, for pie. She liked them so much, and so I climbed the tree and brought the cherries home for her pie. I got a pat on the head, and it was worth all the world.
Yes. Did you tell your mother that you had stolen the cherries?
I didn't have to tell her, because she knew we didn't have a cherry tree, so she must have known I got them from someplace else.
And she was loving and affectionate when you brought her cherries for her cherry pie?
Yes, well, being together.
Well, now, Miss B, I understand you were very fond of music.
That's true.
Did your parents encourage that interest?
Well, they wanted me to play, but never complimented me.
Oh, I see. Now, Miss B, tell us something about your school life. I understand that you attended a boarding school when you were 12. Did you like that? Did you like being away from home?
No, I did not. Very distasteful.
How often did your parents visit you at school?
Once in 3 years.
Well, why didn't your mother visit you oftener?
Well, the first time she came, I cried and wanted to go home. She never came again. She figured it was easier to call me up on the phone. And then, if I cried, she could hang up.
I see. When you left school, did you have many boyfriends, many beaux?
Yes, quite a few.
Did you bring them home?
No, I was never permitted to bring them only to the door.
Yes?
I couldn't bring them in. And she was very strict about that sort of thing. Inasmuch as if I were invited to a movie, I had to be in at 10 o'clock. As the show was late, she wasn't so willing to accept an answer or an excuse. I danced 12 o'clock, and definitely no automobiles.
I see. Did you have any girlfriends?
Just a few.
Mostly boyfriends?
Mostly boyfriends.
How old were you when you were married?
18.
You told me you didn't love your husband very much.
No, I didn't.
Well, why did you marry him?
Oh, I thought maybe I'd have more freedom if I got away from home. I'd have a home of my own. I wouldn't have to answer to anyone.
Well, was he a demonstrative husband, a warm and loving husband?
No, he wasn't. He was very cold and demonstrative in many ways. I have a lot of respect for him, though.
Yes. In the dramatization we heard, Miss B., you were pictured as drinking rather heavily. Well, when did you start to drink?
I was introduced to a doctor by my father, and I had to work for him at one time after the crash in 29.
For this doctor? Yes.
And I started drinking with him, 1, 2, and then it got a little bit more, and that was it.
I wonder if you can tell us how you feel when you drink. You know, liquor does different things to different people. What did it do to you?
Help me forget everything that was distasteful to me. My childhood, my adolescence, and most of all, my 2 marriages.
Yes. Well, why did you drink only with men, and why did you always insist on treating them?
I liked the company. I was the heavier drinker, and drank the most expensive. Therefore, I felt that it was unfair to salaried men to have to pay for my liquor. It was easier for me to pay for theirs.
I see. Now, I wish you'd tell us something about this other man, the one who was first responsible for your drinking. You say you worked for him.
Yes, I did. I disliked him very much.
You came home after these drinking bouts with him, didn't you?
Oh, yes, of course.
I really don't know what to think about this show. October 17th, 1946, I Was a Convict here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. The news from 76 years ago today comes up next on your favorite station. Thanks for tuning into Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite station. We're listening to an episode of I Was a Convict, as it was broadcast at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, October 17th, 1946, over Mutual. In the newspapers of that Thursday, 76 years ago, these were some of the headlines. The bodies of 11 Hitler henchmen were spirited away to secrecy and unmarked graves yesterday, while Harvard guardians of Hermann Goering launched a microscopic inch-by-inch examination of his cell for clues as to how he had managed by suicide to cheat the hangman. Acting Secretary of State Dean Acheson last night reaffirmed the intention of the United States to defend the rights of weaker peoples everywhere to achieve social, political, and economic security democratically without outside interference. In a speech considered a curtain raiser for Secretary of State James F. Burns' Paris Peace Conference report to the nation Friday night, Acheson said the U.S. will continue to press for its goals by the dogged, wearying, but utterly necessary methods of continued conferences and compromises within the framework of its principles. Greece is a victim of undeclared war directed and financed from Yugoslavia. That, according to the deputy governor of Western Macedonia, who declared that in a dispatch received yesterday from Florina. The dispatch dated October 15th in the city at the foot of the Montserrat Pass, leading through the border mountains from Yugoslavia to northern Greece, quoted Greek army officials as saying Yugoslav troops in regular military formations and communist bands wearing uniforms marked with red stars had attacked several Greek outposts and frontier villages in recent days. Fiorello LaGuardia, director of the UNRRA and former New York mayor, said last night President Truman has joined the opposition in his about-face on meat controls. LaGuardia, who described himself as a liberal, went to Oklahoma City to address the National Aviation Clinic, saying there's something more than meat involved. The budget of every American family has been hit. The cost of living is leaping beyond the reach of the average family. The lid on profiteering is off. The bars on controls are down. There is more even than the cost of living involved. It is the science of government. The first industrial strike in our country has forced a complete surrender of government. Plans for circulation of a petition addressed to the Senate urging that Senator Bilbo, the Democrat of Mississippi, not be reappointed chairman of the District of Columbia Committee were announced last night by the Southern Conference for Human Welfare. Dr. Joseph L. Johnson, chairman of the Washington Committee of the conference, said an attempt would be made to obtain 500,000 signatures. The blanks prepared for circulation state that Bilbo is a confessed member of the Ku Klux Klan. Referring to the fact that District of Columbia residents cannot vote, it said, "If we must be ruled as a colony with taxation without representation, we implore our rulers to assign to the district committee only senators who believe in democracy, the Constitution, and equal rights of all our citizens." Emperor Hirohito conferred for 2 hours yesterday with General Douglas MacArthur, and informed sources said they discussed the new constitution, which was passed by the Japanese Diet last week and will be promulgated November 3rd. It was the third time the emperor had gone to see the supreme commander. And the War Assets Administration can take the for sale sign out that slightly used skeleton declared surplus at Northampton General Hospital in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Pacific Lutheran College of Tacoma, Washington advised the War Assets Administration Regional Office it stands ready to pay the advertised price of $145. And those some of the day's top news stories as reported in the newspapers of Thursday, October 17th, 1946, on your radio, I Was a Convict, which concludes in just a few moments here on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. More crime on Tuesday's Classic Radio Theater. Don McLaughlin, Mandel Kramer counter spy from 73 years ago, October 18th, 1949, the case of the photograph Furrier. A $60,000 shipment of furs is stolen from a New York City pier by two crooks in a motorboat, a candid-type camera used to solve the case. That's on Tuesday's Classic Radio Theater. But now the conclusion of Counter Spy, October 17th, 1946, 76 years ago today.
Well, how did your husband feel about all of this?
Didn't like it, and told me about it, and told me I could pack up and leave, which I did, and went home to live with Mother.
Yes. Did you or he try to effect a reconciliation later?
Yes, he did, 3 different times, but my mother definitely put a foot down on that. So.
Your mother put a foot down on it?
Yes.
Well, did you and your husband remain separated?
Yes, we did, and I stayed with Mother.
And then you got a divorce?
That's right.
And then you married this doctor, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Well, how did that marriage work out?
It was very unsuccessful. Physical abuse, and something I wasn't used to. So I finally left again and went home, Mother.
And divorced him, too?
Divorced him, too.
Now, Miss B, you had a daughter by your first husband, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Where was your child all this while? That's all right. Take it easy. Well, she was with your husband,
living,
with her father.
Yes, and his people.
Yes. And of course you miss her, don't you?
Very much.
Have you seen her during the past 8 or 9 years?
No, I have not. And when I was released this last time, I was definitely told that I must not interfere and not try to see her in any way.
I see. Well, now, Miss B, we have time for but 1 or 2 more questions. When you cashed these checks at bars where you were known, you knew you'd be caught when the checks were dishonored, didn't you?
Yes, certainly I did.
Did you cash any of these checks when you were sober?
No, I didn't.
You committed the very first of your forgeries following your second divorce, is that right?
That's right, Mr. Lewis.
Well, thank you, Miss B.
Thank you.
I often wish we had time for more details, because, you see, we've had time to touch only the high spots in Miss B's life. But I think we've uncovered the important factors that influenced her behavior. Miss B sought escape from ugly reality by drinking. Alcohol is a favorite device for escape. She also wanted attention from the opposite sex, attention which, from childhood, she lacked. To supply this lack, she sought favor in the eyes of the men whom she treated with the proceeds of the checks she forged. But why was Miss B drinking so heavily? Now, she didn't suddenly explode into drinking and stealing. In her childhood, we find her the victim of an undemonstrative father and an equally indifferent mother, rather. But while they withheld their own love and sympathy, they also surrounded her with a rigid routine. They imposed strict rules on her coming and going. They sent her off to school and then ignored her. They failed to encourage her interest in music. They, especially the mother, even tried to manage the married life of the girl. Now add to all of this the early signs of her normal craving, every child's craving, for attention. She would bring the switch to her mother in order to be whipped for some mischievous act. Even punishment was welcome if it meant some attention. So it was later, when she must have known she'd be punished for issuing worthless checks. Every desperate effort she had made to capture happiness had failed. Her memories of childhood were bitter. Her adolescent experiences far from satisfying. Her adventures in marriage, to put it mildly, were tragic. I doubt that most of us think often about how people like Miss B get that way, about the long, tortured road they travel, from childhood to adulthood, starving from an insufficiency of the things of which good emotional health is made, affection and understanding, and belonging to a happy family unit. For these things, there are no synthetic substitutes. And in the absence of these things in Miss B's life, we discover the source of her later resort to crime.
Ladies and gentlemen, in these last 15 minutes, we have tried to show you some of the causes that led to a criminal career. On the platform with Mr. Lucas are Mrs. Carolyn K. Simon, a trustee of the National Probation Association and a member of the advisory board of the National Committee on the Cause and Cure of Alcoholism, and as a representative of the general public, William Hillman, Mutual Network Washington News analyst.
May I welcome you, Mrs. Simon and Mr. Hillman. Now, certainly during the course of this program, many questions have probably arisen in the minds of the studio audience, and in a moment we'll invite you to submit these questions to open discussion. If anyone has a question to ask, just raise your hand and the microphone will be brought to you. But first, I see that Mr. Hillman has a question.
Yes, I should like to ask this question. I think your analysis is a little bit one-sided.
How?
In this way, and that's the question I'd like to put is this. You say nothing at all for character, nothing at all for the character of a person. In other words, it seems to me, in listening to this particular person's dereliction, I think the trouble arose as much out of character as it did out of circumstances. Why do you stress the circumstances?
Well, Mr. Hillman, if I know what you mean by character, or think I know what you mean by character, I assume you have to do, you're thinking about her control over her behavior. She was either brought up right or she wasn't brought up right. She either had character or she didn't. But you know...
No, may I interrupt there and say that I mean more than that. I mean characteristics with which a person was born.
Well, these characteristics are not characteristics with which she was born. These were developed. These were cultivated over the years as a result of her experiences. And by her experiences, I mean her experiences in her home, in her school, in her neighborhood, with her family, with her friends. And this is what molds character.
Well, she says her father was undemonstrative, her mother was undemonstrative. They certainly were inborn characteristics. And
in the parents, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she seems to have developed the same characteristic in her attitude toward her child. She was completely indifferent to her own child.
I don't recall having heard a word about her indifference to her child.
Well, I assumed that from the start.
No, Mr. Hillman, no. This child apparently was taken from her pretty early in this series of escapades.
Well, I don't want to take up all this time here. I want to ask one question here. You say she knew she would be punished when she passed the check.
Mm-hmm.
Yet she herself says she passed the checks after drinking. How do you reconcile that?
Well, we didn't hear that she was so drunk that she didn't know what she was doing. I'm not convinced yet that a person isn't aware of some of the things they do while drinking, and Miss B didn't indicate that she didn't know what she was doing. I think the significance of that question and answer has to do with the fact that she was willing to take the risk of punishment to get what she wanted, what she needed at that point.
Personally, and this last question I've been asking at the moment is, don't you think she was just alibying, knowing after all that all the things she was doing was coming from just a fundamentally bad character?
No, I don't think so. I don't think she was either alibying, nor do I think that there was a fundamentally bad character, whatever that means. I don't think there are such things as fundamentally bad characters. I think these things are cultivated, as I said before, by environment. And they're either cultivated in the right direction or the wrong direction, as the case may be. How do you feel about that, Mrs. Simon?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with you as to that. I think it's unfortunate that in this girl's case, not only did she have a father and a mother who were not who weren't developing her toward a sound childhood and adolescence, but she seems never to have met anyone in school or in the community. She never was touched by a Girl Scout group or a campfire group or a YWCA or any teacher who seemed to give her the right reaction, anyone who showed enough interest in her to strengthen that bond that she needed to have to society.
Mr. Lucas, I have a question from the audience. What is your name, please?
Mildred Newman.
And your question?
Why did Miss B sign her father's and ex-husband's name to the checks all the time?
That's an interesting question. I think for this reason. She identified her father's name and her father and her husband's name, her first husband's name, and that husband, with all of her unhappiness. And I think that what she was doing, maybe she wasn't aware of what she was doing, but I think that what she was doing was this. She was trying to make them pay for her unhappiness.
I have another question here, Mr. Lucas. What is your name, please?
Laura Ecker.
And what is your question?
I wonder why there wasn't an investigation made when the father refused to be responsible for the daughter. It seems that someone should have stepped in at that point, even though there was a trial. Or
How do you feel about that, Mrs. Simon?
I feel strongly that you're quite right about that. In a well-organized court, at that point, there would have been available to the judge the investigation of a good probation officer who would have shown what her family background was, what her needs were, and would have helped the judge work out a better pattern for the girl. Certainly it was unfortunate that his decision rested on the father's whim.
Yes, I would agree with that, Mrs. Simon.
Mr. Lucas, I'd like to break in again here. I'd like to go back to my point of character, the fundamental character. I watch international events and national events very closely, and I find too frequently these days alibis of action of statesmen and so-called statesmen today is entirely based upon what they call circumstances. Now, it seems to me that it is purely an alibi. There must be something of a moral strength, or there is the evil quality in a person, which accounts for his actions. Don't you agree?
No, I don't agree, Mr. Hillman. I wouldn't know from what source that moral strength, as you call it, would come, except from the things which surround the child. Now, if the child draws moral strength from that environment, all well and good. This girl probably would not have gotten into her difficulty had she been able to draw that strength.
Well, may I ask you this, Mr. Lucas? Haven't you known of families where there may be 2 or 3 sons of fine character, and yet you'll have one black sheep in the family? How do you account for that? All the circumstances are similar under which these children are brought up.
They're seemingly similar, Mr. Hillman. They are not identical. First of all, I don't believe that parents treat their children identically. They think they do, but they don't. And secondly, there is the question of individual reaction to what appear to be the same or identical stimuli. These individual reactions differ. And there is a whole combination of factors that are responsible for that. Is there another question?
I'm sorry, Mr. Lucas, but we must interrupt at this time, for we still have to hear from you, and I'm sure you'll tell us how, in your opinion, this crime might have been prevented.
Well, I'll try, and this may answer some of Mr. Hillman's questions. In my opinion, these crimes could have been prevented. Miss B hadn't committed an offense that we know of before she was 30 years old. But there is no doubt that what she did at 30 and thereafter was the product of what was done to her when she was much younger. What a different story she would have to tell today if the people near her had had the foresight, the ability to see that you just can't handle a young girl as Miss B was handled and expect her to come out undamaged. Children are like delicate mechanisms. When people are as impersonal as Miss B's parents were, and at the same time surround a child with all the rigid rules and regulations we might expect to find in an institution instead of a home, then the child is unhappy. And what is worse, much worse, the foundation of her future happiness is shaky. But there was still a way by which Miss B's crimes could have been prevented. If the school to which she had been sent when she was 12 observed how the parents ignored the child, they could have advised the parents of her needs and how those needs could best be satisfied. Miss B sought a means of leaving this home through marriage. This was her first escape. A successful marriage might have been a partial solution to her problem at that point. Had she had a warmly sympathetic and loving husband, a man who offered her the incentive for building together the kind of home she lacked as a child, these things might not have happened. Instead, driven desperately to find an excuse, any excuse, for escape from her unreasonably strict and coldly indifferent mother and father, she chose an equally cold and impersonal husband, which only drove her more desperately to seek a new means of escape. From that point forward, events moved swiftly toward her collapse, and there was nobody near until it was too late to prevent that collapse. There is no magical formula by which people like you and the radio audience, can be helpful in altering the course of the lives of the many Miss B's in preventing their crimes. But there are a few simple rules you might follow. First, you must be interested in doing something about correcting situations like these. If a person you know is sick, you'd not hesitate to find a doctor. If a young person you know is unhappy or neglected or being otherwise badly handled, it's your duty, mind you, as a citizen, as a relative, as a neighbor, to secure referral of that person to agencies in your community, agencies which are specialists in the welfare of youth. Now, psychiatrists can be enormously helpful. Schools can be, too. So can the church and the settlement house. You say this may be none of your business, and my answer to you is that all children are your business. Your own in particular, your neighbors, too. If you pay, as you do through taxes, very heavy taxes, for law enforcement, then you ought to be willing to do everything you can to eliminate the necessity for so much law enforcement by preventing crime before it starts, instead of punishing it after it's committed.
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Participating on the program this week with Mr. Edwin J. Lucas were Mrs. Carolyn K. Simon, a trustee of the National Probation Association. William Hillman, Mutual Network Washington News analyst, represented the public. Be sure to listen next week when the Mutual Broadcasting System, in cooperation with the Society for the Prevention of Crime, again presents
I-was-a-convict.
The crime program with a purpose, showing that crime takes but a moment to commit, but requires a young lifetime to prepare.
The kind of discussion show that you heard a lot on radio in the classic age. The episode I Was a Convict, 76 years ago, October 17th, 1946. That's one of the few episodes of the program that we still have available today. Thank you for tuning in to Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Visit our webpage, classicradio.stream. You can stream our shows, learn more about classic radio collecting. You can contact me there. You can buy me a copy if you want to help us build a classic radio collection. And as always, we appreciate hearing from you. Our social media links are available there as well. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday. Tell your friends great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite station.